Hello, friends. As we have seen in our study of 1 Corinthians chapter 7, God has determined that the church should function in the opposite way of the world and of religion. And we notice that I'm just going to draw our attention to 1 Corinthians 7, verses 3 and 4 for an example of that, okay? So it says, the husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. Look at verse 4. The wife gives authority over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to his wife. That's just radical if you think about it. In this day and age of, autonomy reigning supreme, and each citizen feels that they have a right to sovereignty and to total freedom, personal freedoms. What is it that would lead a wife to give authority over her body to her husband, and the husband likewise to give authority over his body to his husband, his wife? Well, the gospel, right? The gospel tells us that when Jesus came to this earth, he willingly gave authority over his body to the religious leaders and the ruling government, who promptly abused and radically mistreated and ultimately killed him. Until we see Jesus purposefully giving up his freedoms, surrendering his rights to forgive our sins and to remove our guilt, we are going to cling to our rights. We are going to hold on to our autonomy and our personal freedoms. But when we do immerse ourselves in the gospel story, when we live out the events of Golgotha and we go with Jesus up the hill of Calvary, we see him offer himself as a sacrifice of atonement willingly for us. The appropriate response is to follow Jesus by joyfully surrendering our rights. As his bride, we gladly give up our authority over our bodies to Jesus. Why? Well, we watched him purchase us. We saw him make that transaction with his own blood. His death on the cross for us broke our hearts and then healed them completely. You see, people who have surrendered to the Lord are willing. They give up freely the authority to him. And we can likewise submit joyfully to one another. Husbands and wives give authority to their spouses. Singles relinquish control to their eternal husband, Jesus. We submit to one another with great joy. Why? Because the cross has changed our hearts and enabled us to die to ourselves. I want to close this week out with you in 1 Corinthians 7 by reading a short commentary by the New Living Translation Study Bible Notes, on 1 Corinthians 7, and here's what it says. Believers are called to forfeit their rights, suffer, and even die for the sake of Christ. They are to turn away from the things of the world that everybody else lives for, and even despise their life in this world. So also Paul encourages them to give up the normal desires for marriage and family and remain single for Christ, if they have that spiritual gift. What lies behind such an apparently extreme view of life? For Paul, it's the awareness that believers are claimed by Christ and so belong to him, body and soul. When Christ died, he bought them for himself. They must no longer live simply for themselves and their own desires. Having died to their own personal interests, they are called to live entirely for their Lord. I hope that's an encouragement and a challenge to you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.